Hello and welcome to tonight's video as we cover patch 14.15. Probably should have done this video a little while ago, but just getting it out of the way. Now that the World's teams, we still have LCK to work through, LCS, and a couple teams here or there in LEC and etc. But that stuff we'll do when their playoffs are done and things like that. So let's get this out of the way. 14-15 utilized in playoffs for most of the major regions and towards the end of their regular seasons, and there was some impact on the meta and champion presence as a result. Keep in mind, I do not care about necessarily I feel X or Y way based on a champion being played. It's more so, was a champion picked more or less due to this patch? Did this patch try and change how often this champion appears? And we can say that in the case of at least 4 champions, the buffs and nerfs did change presence at least 10%. And then we have Skarner, which was adjusted, and Aurora being introduced to pro play, also affecting this patch. So in terms of buff, Varus was buffed. 80 carry went from 2% presence to 23% presence, going with 21% difference, and that's a big deal. 1 out of every 50 games to nearly 1 out of every 4. You barely see Varus. You see Varus maybe once a week versus seeing Varus once a day, if not more. So that is, I would say, the buff did make Varus more prevalent. Now, nerfs. Leona goes from 87% presence to 76. So 9 out of every 10 games to 3 out of every 4. It was an 11% difference. Ezreal, 94% to 79%, so 15% difference in pick rate. Shyvana goes from 22% in the jungle, so 1 out of every 5 games, to literally 1%. Didn't even get picked, actually. It got banned once. So Shyvana completely removed from the meta, essentially. Varus completely introduced, and we see Leona and Ezreal. Their nerfs not strong enough to remove them from the meta, but it did knock them down a bit. In terms of adjustments, Skarner goes from 0% to 10%, so completely non-existent to a fringe meta pick, which, in my opinion, that does add a little bit of difference to the meta. I know we saw Skarner already this year, but its return is something to think about, at least on 15. We are currently in 14-16. That video will come out probably, actually, LCK's got a little way to go. We'll see. Aurora goes from 0% to half of the games, essentially. So I would say this patch did change things because Aurora was in draft quite a bit. Actually, I got to reiterate, presence means pick or ban, not only pick. So in draft, we see these champions more often. You may not see them in game if you don't pay attention to draft, but in my opinion, when we look at buffs and nerfs, we got champions that are must bans to then champions that are must picks, that can't be allowed through the draft unnecessarily. And then you got, counters and things like that all the way down to fringe meta picks, OTP stuff, and then champions that just are non-existent completely, that then may get introduced to the meta. In terms of pick rate and presence rate, on 14-14, it went Ezreal and Ashe at the top, both 80 carries, to Leona at support, Renekton, top lane, Sejuani in the jungle, Rumble in top lane, Corki, Lucian, K'Sante, Zeri. So we see 3 top laners, 3 mid laners, a jungler, and 280 carries at the top, and actually 280 carries that role swapped to mid lane on 14-14. Now 14-15, we do see some differences here. There are 3 new champions that were not in the top 10 that are now in the top 10. And some differences here. So Ashe is still towards the top at 80 carry. Rumble still towards the top. But actually, it's funny because Rumble, it goes to show how much this patch changed things in terms of champion presence, because Rumble goes from 80% presence, which was what? 6th place, to 2nd at only 81%. So that many different champions were in draft on 14-15 than 14-14. We're seeing pretty much the same presence, but a higher priority in terms of the list here. Corki goes up 6% and goes from like 6th to 3rd, 7th to 3rd actually. Ezreal dropped 16%. Leona dropped. Renekton dropped 11% in presence on this patch. Then we have some champions joining. So, Maokai in the jungle, returning to the meta on 14-15. Misfortune at 80 carry joins, and Rel at support is in the top 10 of presence. And Zeri, once again, 10th place, but now is 69% presence, 68% presence instead of 59. So, in this middle group here, we don't have it as dominated, but towards the bottom, it does become a little more clear what's going on here. The 3 champions that are not in the top 10 that were, Sejuani is out, Lucian was out, and K'Sante. So, some differences there. We have two top laners, a jungler still, 2 mids, 3 80 carries, and 2 supports. The meta continues to shift. Each patch, the meta changes a bit. For the most part, we have seen 1 or 2 this year that really kind of left things as they were. The buffs and nerfs really didn't do much. If you missed LS's interview of Riot Froxen and Freak, you should watch it, as I believe a lot of people bitch and moan about patches, but really don't pay attention to just how lucky we are that they are very transparent in what they're trying to do. Whether you agree with it or not, at least they're attempting to tell you what their plan is, and they have a plan. Like, sometimes it's like throwing darts for some of these people, but these guys at least are trying to have a plan in place to affect gameplay. And I think it's a big deal. I think a lot of people should give them more credit than they more credit than they do the crap they give. And I mean, they're attempting to do things, right? And they've even said it themselves, I think, in this interview. Sometimes buffs and nerfs don't affect pro play for 6 months or so. In the end, because it takes a while, especially new champion being introduced to the meta. That really hasn't been picked lately. A lot of the players aren't as familiar with the champion. They're not as comfortable, and it could take 6 months to get comfortable. Between just playing it in solo queue to playing it in scrims and trial and error and figuring out what's the best way to play around this champion. And people are impatient. They don't understand that. They're honestly, with solo queue brain, they think they can just, I'm just going to go play this champion. If I can do it, then you should be able to do it on stage. And that's why you are where you are. And that's why they are where they are. Because of that difference in mindset. Now, do you need 6 months to necessarily get it done? Maybe not. But just throwing it out there and caution in the wind, yeah, that's why there's a difference in positioning in terms of the hierarchy of this whole deal. So, that is a thing. But either way, 14-15 did change the meta quite a bit. I mean, Aurora coming into play in and of itself did quite a big difference. But we did see 5 champions change double digits. We saw 3 champions in the top 10 change. So that is a thing. Thank you for watching. If you like the video, like it, subscribe to the channel for daily League of Legends content. Follow me on Twitter, join the Discord, become a YouTube supporter, and hope to see you again tomorrow.